بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. The muhaqqiq, the editor and the annotator, Dr. Muhammad Hajjaj Al-Khatib, says here on page 29 of the first volume, Al-Mabhath Al-Thani Tarjamatul Khatib Al-Baghdadi, the biography of the author of Al-Hafidh Al-Khatib Al-Baghdadi. And we're going to read the book bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, summarize certain points, give commentary, explanation, and further benefit on other points. So it says, هو الحافظ الكبير الإمام محدث الشام والعراق مؤرخ بغداد أحد الأعلام المشهورين أبو بكر أحمد بن علي بن ثابت بن أحمد بن مهدي البغدادي اشتهر بالخطيب البغدادي ينزع أصله إلى عشيرة عربية سكنت الحصاصة من أعمال الكوفة من نواحي الفرات. ولد يوم الخميس ل6 بقين من جماد الآخرة سنة 92 و300 في غزية من أعمال الحجاز. He says first and foremost his name. What's his actual name? He is the great grandmaster, Al-Hafidh al-Kabir, one of the prodigies of Al-Islam with regards to memorization and understanding. He was the muhaddith, the hadith master of two lands, of Sham and of Iraq, of Syria and then Iraq, what many people today mention the Levant and this area, these meeting places of those two countries. And he was the historian of Baghdad, and one of the scholars of Islam who enjoyed a great amount of repute and a great amount of fame. And he was well known to all. His actual kunya is Abu Bakr. That was his kunya, Abu Bakr. And we all know the sunnah of the kunya and how the scholars of hadith employed this sunnah and naming themselves and calling their friends and companions and teachers, etc. So Abu Bakr, and his actual name here is Ahmed. Ahmed was his first name. And he's the son of Ali, who is the son of Thabit, who's the son of Muhammad, or the son of Ahmed again, who's the son of Mahdi, and he is Baghdadi. He's famously known as Al-Khatib of Baghdad, and his lineage is traced back to an Arabic or an Arabian clan, Arabian family that lived in the place called Al-Hassasa, which is from the different villages or regions of Kufa, all right, of Kufa. Type. So obviously he's from Iraq. We know with regards to the merging of time and of geography, okay, where Iraq is, the importance of Iraq, the importance of Baghdad and Mesopotamia, the Sumerians, the Assyrians, and the different things that took place in that part of the land, which was oftentimes called the cradle of civilization, from which many things came forth. He was born on Thursday on the 6th of Jumad al-Akhirah in the year 392. So he was born into the 4th century. He was born in the 4th century, right? Tayyib. In a place called Ghuzayya, which was from the regions in Hijaz. The regions of Hijaz. So here he's born in Hijaz. He wasn't born in Iraq, but he was born in Hijaz, it says here. كان والده أبو الحسن أحد حفاظ القرآن الكريم وقرأه على أبي حفص من سواد العراق أو الكتاني وقد تولى الإمامة والخطابة في قرية. Then he talks about his father and how his father was one of the memorizers of the Quran, right? And how his father was an imam and a khatib. He was an imam and a khatib of a place called Darzijan. Okay, Darzijan was the place in which his father was the khatib. He was the speaker, the orator, the one who gave the khutbah. He addressed the people there. Which is in the, he says, Junub Gharbi Baghdad, which is in the southwestern section of Baghdad. And his father was the Khatib for about 20 years, he says. And this is وَلِهَذَا لَازَمَهُ لَقَبُ الْخَطِيب. And this is what he got the nickname Al-Khatib, the khutbah giver, the khutbah maker. Okay, the Khatib as we say in English. Then he talks about his upbringing. نشأ أبو بكر في رعاية والده فبث فيه روح العلم والتقى وحبب إليه القرآن ومجالس العلماء فتعلم القراءة والكتابة وقراءة القرآن. And then he talks about how his father brought him up in a household of knowledge and how his father made it beloved to him, the sitting with the learned, knowledgeable people, the scholars of Islam. He learned how to read, how to write, he learned the Quran and its recitation, etc. طيب. Then he says وقد ظهرت عليه علائم النباحة وألهم طلب العلم وطمح والده في زيادة تحصيله ليكون أحد العلماء فأسمعه الحديث في صغره. And when he was young, it was clear that he was talented and he was blessed, that he was a prodigy, and he was going to be in the night someone bright with a brilliant future. So his father worked very hard to inspire him to seek knowledge and to instill in him the values of scholarship. His father wanted him to hear the hadiths and to listen to the scholars of hadith at a very young age. In other words, for him to get the ulu was-sanad. طيب خيرا إن شاء الله. Then he talks about وكان أول سماعه في محرم سنة 300 على أبي الحسن ابن رزقية البزار في جامع المدينة ببغداد وابن 11 سنة فكتب عنه إملاء مجلسا واحدا. So the first time that he heard hadith was at the age of 11. ثم انقطع عنه نحو 3 سنين يتردد فيها على مجالس كبار الفقهاء. Then he stopped listening to the hadith and studying hadith, and he went to study fiqh for some time, back and forth. And he was studying the Shafi'i madhab. Okay, the Shafi'i madhab. Then he talks and he speaks on how he went back to his original sheikh, Abu Hassan ibn Rizqiyya al-Bazzar. Then he talks about كما انتفع بأبي نصر بن الصباغي وبهذا برع فيه فقه الشافعي ومسائل الخلاف بين المذاهب الفقهية حتى عد من فقهاء الشافعية كما كان يختلف من جالس المحدثين ويسمع منهم ويكتب عنهم وغلب عليه الحديث ومخالطة علمائه وأهله وكثرة الاشتغال به. طيب. He then says, and he studied with other Shafi'i scholars in Baghdad, and he became very proficient in the Shafi'i school. And he came to know of the different views and the different madhabs outside of the Shafi'i school. But then he became dedicated to hadith. He made that his specialty. He made that his point of focus. And that was the thing that he became known for. And he sat with the ulama of hadith more than anyone else. He mixed with them more than anyone else. And he stayed busy with writing, memorizing, reviewing, going back and forth. وجمعه في صدور حفاظه والارتحاء في طلبه, and traveling towards them. The next section he speaks on where Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi rahimahullah ta'ala traveled. Where did he go? Where did he actually go and study to seek ilm? And we all know the importance of traveling to seek hadith. We've done several different sessions just on this topic. عادة أهل الحديث ألا يرحل طالب من بلده إلى غيره في طالب الحديث حتى يسمع أكابر شيوخ بلده. وقد سمع الخطيب من أكابر حفاظ بغداد مثل ابن رزقية وأبي الحسن بن السلط الأهوازي وأبي عمر بن مهدي وأبي الحسين بن المتيم والحسين بن الحسن الجواليقي وابن أبي الفوارسي وهلال الحفار وإبراهيم بن مخلد إلى آخره. So he talks here about how Hafiz al-Khatib al-Baghdadi rahimahullah, he followed the sunnah of the people of his country. And the sunnah of the scholars of hadith was not to travel abroad until a person has soaked up all of the knowledge that he could acquire locally. Not to travel abroad until one could acquire and obtain all of the knowledge that he could obtain for free in his own country without the hardship and without the rigorous pains of traveling. Khairan, inshallah, we've explained that as well when we spoke on the compilation of the sunnah and when we spoke on traveling to seek hadith, and how this is not absolute in our times, in our Western countries, whereas oftentimes a person has to take advantage of scholarship abroad. A person has to take advantage of leaving his country and going overseas, even though a person hasn't studied everything from every person in his country. Whether you say there are or there aren't scholars in your country, there are learned people in your country, students of knowledge in your country, scholars who have migrated from Egypt and Lebanon and Palestine and Kenya and Somalia. Okay, they've come from Nigeria, they've come from Pakistan and India, and they live in the U.S., or they live in Canada, or they live in the U.K., or they live in Australia. And you have the opportunity to study with them versus you having the opportunity to go to Kenya, to go to Somalia, to go to study in Pakistan, or to study in Medina University or Qura in Mecca. And that it's not absolute that you can't go first before you study with all of them because you have an opportunity. Let alone the fact of the scholars in your country and just the nature of the countries today. And things are not like how they were back then. And we always try to place an emphasis on this. Is the difference with regards to the social, civil, economic, military, religious, and political environments. And we're not living in Muslim countries. We don't want to repeat that. So he mentions where he went and who he went to go travel and study with. And those great ulama, before he traveled and studied with them, those who were local, his local scholars, before he went abroad. And he also met from the different scholars that wasn't even from Baghdad, but they were there visiting and staying in Baghdad. Then he talks about how Al-Khatib sought the advice of some of his scholars before leaving Baghdad and going to other countries. So now he's going to mention, or we're going to mention briefly, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, because this is a brief summarized explanation or brief summary of his biography. Where are some of the places that he went inside Iraq, away from Baghdad, and outside of Iraq as well. He says, وكما سمع من علماء بغداد سمع من علماء المقيمين حولها في بعض المدن والقرى مثل عكبرى ويعقوبة والأنبار وجرزيجان وجرجرايا. وكان سماعه في عكبارى من أحمد بن علي بن أيوب العكبري سنة 10 و400. He went to the other villages, the other cities, and the other towns outside of Baghdad, surrounding Baghdad, such as Ukbara, Yaquba, Al-Anbar, and other locations as well. وقد رحل إلى الكوفة والبصرة سنة 12 و400 وله 20 عاما فسمع عددا من أكابر شيوخ البصرة. So he traveled to Kufa, he traveled to Basra, and he was 20 years old, right? Then he says وعاد في نفس السنة إلى بغداد وظهر فضله وذا عصيته لتفرده ببعض ما جمعه من رواية رواية من الحديث وتعلق نجمه إلى آخره. Then he talks about him going back to Baghdad and how he became famous at a young age, and he became known and prestigious at a young age, and that's because he outdid his peers. طيب. Then he moves forward. And he speaks on فاتجه إلى نيسابور. Then he went to Nishapur. Obviously, Nishapur is the country of Imam Muslim. Imam Muslim, in that part of the world. Khairan inshallah, and the scholars that he met there, and the scholars that he heard from there. And from the most famous of them, قال الخطيب وكنت كثيرا أذاكر البرقاني بالأحاديث فيكتبها عني. And then he says, one of the people that I studied with the most and debated with the most, or made mudhakara, revision with the most, was Al-Burqani. And Al-Burqani, we know, was one of the greatest disciples of Ad-Darqutni, rahimahullah ta'ala, the alim of Baghdad, of ilm al-ilal and al-hadith. And his biography is on the channel as well. Al-Burqani was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, disciple of Al-Hafiz Ad-Darqutni, rahimahullah ta'ala. So he went to Asbahan, Nishapur, and he met with those scholars there in further parts of the east. Okay, from them is Abu Nu'aym al-Asbahani, famous, right? And then he says, رحلاته إلى بلاد الشام. يذكر المؤرخون أن الخطيب البغدادي زار بلاد الشام مرارا، ونزل دمشق عدة مرات ومكث فيها فترات طويلة، فمر بها عند سفره إلى الحج سنة 44 و400. So he went to Syria several times. He went to Sham, the lands of Sham, several times. And one of those times he went when he was going to make Hajj. And this goes to show us killing more than one bird with one stone. The concept of multitasking, going to make Hajj and also studying at the same time. Then he mentions about Damascus. Obviously, Damascus, one of the oldest cities in history, one of the most ancient civilizations. He says, رحلته إلى مكة. Then he also traveled to Mecca. Of course, obviously, if he made Hajj. دخل الخطيب مكة حاجا في ذي الحجة من سنة 45 و400. Year 445, he went to make Hajj. And he mentions here how he says, وشرب من ماء زمزم 3 شربات. And he drank Zamzam water 3 times. وسأل الله عز وجل 3 حاجات آخذا بالحديث ماء زمزم لما شرب له. فالحاجة الأولى أن يحدث بتاريخ بغداد بها، والثانية أن يملي الحديث بجامع المنصور، والثالثة أن يدفن عند بشر الحافي، فقضى الله له ذلك بعد حجته وعودته إلى بغداد. So when he went to Mecca in this year, it says here that he drank the Zamzam water 3 times, and he asked Allah for 3 wishes. He made 3 supplications. We all know the famous hadith, Ma'u Zamzam lima shuriba lah. Zamzam water is for what you drink it for. It's for whatever you drink it. And obviously the scholars, they differ on the hadith. Is it authentic or not? Is it hasan or not? Or is it da'if? The hadith about drinking Zamzam water and making the dua at the time in which a person drinks the Zamzam water. What's important is, as Khatib drank the water, and he asked Allah for 3 things. Number 1 is for him to have the ability to narrate his book Tarikh Baghdad there, for him to spread his knowledge there. 2 is for him to make a imla, dictation of hadith, in the Mansour Mosque. And 3 is for him to be buried near Bishr al-Hafi, from the great Zuhad, the pious, righteous people who came before him. And it says that Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi rahimahullah was granted all 3 wishes when he returned back to Baghdad. All 3 wishes he gave him. Subhanallah. ولقي في مكة بعض العلماء وسمع منهم من هؤلاء القاضي أبو عبد الله محمد بن سلامة القضاعي وقرأ صحيح البخاري على طيب. Then he mentions here that he met many great scholars in Mecca, and he studied Sahih al-Bukhari upon a woman, Karima bint Ahmed al-Marwaziyya. And this goes to show us and teach us lack of prejudice, and that if you have knowledge to take from anyone, you take it from that person, man, woman, whatever they look like, wherever they come from. So one of his teachers was a woman. طيب. وكان سماعها لهذا الكتاب أقدم سماع في عصرها. طيب. And he mentioned some of the special features of that woman, that scholar of hadith, and what he got from her. Then he says, الخطيب في بغداد كان الخطيب قد نشأ في طيب. He talks about him in Baghdad, right? طيب. Then he mentions some controversy here with regards to some of the Jews of Iraq. Very interesting. Him leaving Iraq, Baghdad, and going back to Damascus, right? And we're going to summarize all of these different points, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Him going back, so on and so forth. And of course, there are many different things that took place in his lifetime with regards to controversy, with regards to scandal, and with regards to problems. And that's the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone that's famous, anyone that's popular, anyone that dares to be great and to step outside of the box and doesn't listen to what people say you can and cannot be, he's going to come across these things. It's a must. That's the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Muslims and for non-Muslims alike. For Muslims and for non-Muslims alike. So perhaps, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, one day we'll have the ability to mention a more detailed discussion of some of the problems that he had in Iraq. And from the most famous of those problems, of course, is the controversy with him being a Shafi'i after he used to be Hanbali, some say, and also the bigotry of many of the Hanbali scholars and the fanaticism that they had against him. And that's a very long discussion with regards to the fiqh wars, the madhab wars, and the ta'assub, the taqleed, okay, the fanatics, the zealots, and they try to force someone to be upon their way, and oftentimes they'll abuse someone. They'll abuse them verbally or maybe even physically. And the different stories that you can read about him being violated and disrespected, different things that they did to him because he left their way. And that's unfortunate, and that's old. It's nothing new. It's been going on, and it will continue to go on unless Allah wills for it to stop. With regards to madhab people fighting others who aren't upon their way, calling them names, abusing them, and the list goes on. طيب خير إن شاء الله تعالى. So he talks about how he went to these different regions here, back and forth between Baghdad and Damascus, him teaching, all right, different things that he went through, different trials and tribulations, and the status that he went through, or the status that he attained. Also his relationship with some of the different rulers, different political people, different issues, so on and so forth. Also, in summarizing this, of course, there are other different controversies that Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi rahimahullah ta'ala went through with regards to ilm al-hadith and al-kalam and usul fiqh, so on and so forth. Moving forward, he says here, rahimahullah, مرضه ووفاته لما شعر الخطيب بدنو أجله كتب إلى القائم بأمر الله. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll stop the session here, بإذن الله ta'ala, and hopefully finish in another time.